3 people vanished from a house that showed no signs of violence. No shattered doors. No screams reported. No blood, no struggle, no farewell notes. By sunrise, 3 lives had dissolved into absence, leaving behind only objects that no longer made sense where they were found. What makes this case historically unsettling is not just that the women disappeared. It is that the disappearance itself resisted explanation from the very first hour. Investigators were not confronted with chaos. They were confronted with order. To understand why this absence became permanent, it is necessary to step back. Not into speculation, but into structure. Into the social, technological, and cultural conditions of Springfield, Missouri, in the early 1990s. Springfield in 1992 was a city that believed it understood itself. It was not a metropolis, nor a rural outpost. It was a regional hub, grounded in service industries, healthcare, education, and retail. Crime existed, but it was compartmentalized in the public imagination. Violence was something that happened elsewhere, or at least to other kinds of people. The city sat within the cultural sphere often referred to as the Bible Belt. Churches were not merely places of worship, but centers of social gravity. Community identity was built on familiarity, routine, and the assumption that neighbors noticed one another. This assumption mattered, because it shaped how danger was perceived, and more importantly, how it was underestimated. In 1992, the infrastructure of daily life was fundamentally different. There were no mobile phones to log movements. No GPS data. No text messages, no social media timestamps, no digital exhaust of everyday decisions. Communication depended on landlines and answering machines. Memory depended on human recollection. Evidence depended on physical preservation. When something went missing, it did not leave a trail of metadata. It simply disappeared. The 3 women at the center of this case were living unremarkable lives by design. That normality is not incidental. It is part of why the case remains unresolved. Cheryl Elizabeth Levitt was 47 years old. She worked as a cosmetologist. She was recently divorced and navigating financial and emotional adjustments common to that stage of life. In April of 1992, she and her daughter moved into a new house on East Delmar Street. 2 months. That was how long they had lived there. Long enough to settle in. Not long enough to be fully known. Suzanne, known as Susie, was 19. She had just graduated from Kickapoo High School. Her plans were modest and practical. She worked at a movie theater and intended to pursue cosmetology, following a path similar to her mother's. Stacy McCall was 18. She was also a recent graduate, a close friend of Susie's. That friendship, formed through school and shared routines, would place her inside a mystery that was never meant to include her. June 6, 1992, was a night of ritual. Graduation night carried expectations that were almost ceremonial. Photos, parties, movement from one house to another. Plans changed throughout the evening. A hotel reservation in Branson was discussed, then abandoned. Friends gathered elsewhere. Decisions were made quickly, casually, without the weight of consequence. This flexibility was ordinary, and it is precisely why it leaves so little trace. Sometime around 2:15 in the morning, Susie and Stacy returned to the house on East Delmar. They had intended to stay elsewhere, but the house they visited was already full. This decision was not dramatic. It did not feel dangerous. It was simply convenient. Inside the house, Cheryl was home. She had spoken to a friend earlier that night. Nothing in that conversation suggested fear, urgency, or anticipation of harm. What happened next is defined not by what is known, but by what never appeared. There were no neighbors reporting screams. No calls to police. No signs of forced entry. Whatever occurred inside that house unfolded quietly, and quickly enough that it left no visible disruption behind. By the morning of June 7th, concern began to form slowly. Not alarm. Concern. Friends expected to meet Susie and Stacy for a day trip. When no one answered the phone, they went to the house. Inside, nothing looked wrong in the way crime scenes are expected to look wrong. Purses were present. Keys were left behind. Cars sat in the driveway. A small dog, Cinnamon, was inside, agitated but unharmed. Beds appeared slept in. Personal items remained undisturbed. The house did not tell a story of violence. It told a story of interruption. One detail stood out. A porch light had been shattered. At the time, this detail did not trigger forensic caution. It triggered housekeeping. Someone swept the glass away. The fragments were discarded. With them went fingerprints, patterns, and context that would never be recovered. This moment matters historically, because it marks the point where the case lost information it did not yet know it needed. Another loss would follow. An answering machine message. At some point, a strange message had been recorded. Accounts differ on its tone and content. What does not differ is its fate. It was erased. Accidentally. Permanently. In modern investigations, audio logs are duplicated, time-stamped, and archived. In 1992, they existed as a single fragile artifact. When the disappearance was finally reported to police, the case had already entered a structural disadvantage. Not because of negligence, but because of assumptions. Early interpretations leaned toward voluntary absence. Young people sometimes disappear after graduation. Adults sometimes leave without notice. This interpretation delayed the full weight of investigative response. Time passed. Evidence cooled. As the reality of the situation became undeniable, the investigation intensified. But escalation cannot restore what has already vanished. The case eventually reached national attention. It was featured on America's Most Wanted. On December 31st, 1992, a call came in. The caller claimed to have information. As the call was being transferred, the line went dead. The caller never called back. No identity was recovered. No recording survived. This moment became another fixed absence in the case. A point of infinite speculation anchored to zero evidence. As years passed, the disappearance transitioned from active investigation to historical artifact. Legal declarations of death were issued. Memorials were placed. Yet the case never closed. It fossilized. New theories emerged periodically. Vans. Confessions. Buried remains beneath concrete. Each theory carried emotional weight. Few carried evidentiary weight. The Springfield Three case endures because it exposes the limits of certainty. It shows how quickly normality can collapse without spectacle. It also demonstrates that investigations do not fail only through error. They fail through time, fragility, and assumptions that feel reasonable in the moment. If this disappearance happened today, digital footprints might trace movements. Cameras might capture arrivals. Metadata might preserve what memory cannot. But history does not grant retroactive tools. It preserves only consequences. The house on East Del Mar still exists. The absence remains. The unanswered question is not simply where they went. It is how easily 3 lives could vanish without leaving enough behind to bring them back.